Hey, this is Miss Cooper. We're going to do a review of your review sheet. And your review sheet has 16 chapters. I'm just going to do 8 so that we can kind of spend a few minutes on some of these things. So, again, the purpose of the review sheet is to make sure you can identify which chapter these items can be found in. When you get to a question on your final exam, and you're not sure you remember where that information can be found, then you go to the review sheet and you find that information, and that will take you to the chapter that you need to be in. You need to go into your folder or go on, scroll through your documents and find the information that you need so that you can refresh yourself and remember what happened and who it happened to and so forth and so on. So chapter 1 dealt with at the age of absolutism. So it talked about the Palace of Versailles, which was built by Louis XIV, the Petition of Right, a primary document that pretty much talked about what kings had a right to do, the divine right of kings. The Petition of Right and the divine right of kings both appeared in primary documents, and as in there were long passages. So you want to go in and kind of understand the concept at that time was the king was supposed to always be right, or the queen. There were people that felt like they needed to have more rights, and this is what caused the English Civil War. The issues between religious freedom and religious oppression, and even the rights or the reach of the king. Okay, so the English Civil War gets started, and we get this guy, Oliver Cromwell, becomes the leader in England after that Civil War ends. And then we went into a period called the Glorious Revolution, where they kind of brought a king back. They got tired of Oliver Cromwell. He was too puritanical, religiously fanatical, and some people just felt like not a good thing. So they got rid of him and they restored the monarch. Okay, so then we have the Restoration, and that's connected to the Glorious Revolution. So you have the English Civil War, the Glorious Revolution, the Restoration. Then it talks about Louis XIV, again, is the one that built the Palace of Versailles. Cardinal Richelieu and Cardinal Mazarin, both of those were like advisors to the kings. And it's Richelieu, that's the advisor who was actually the advisor to Louis XIII, and Cardinal Mazarin was the advisor to Louis XIV. But Richelieu is the one that used spies, and he did all kind of shady things just to try to make sure he was protecting the king. Ivan the Terrible, associated with Russia. Peter the Great, Russia. Frederick William, Germany. Queen Elizabeth I, England. The 30 Years' War started because of religious issues. Okay. Chapter 2, we have the Enlightenment. Okay, the great thinkers that come and challenge the age of absolutism. This is what brings it to its closing, because the world had gone on like this since antiquity, you know. So Rene Descartes, I think therefore I am. John Locke, rationalism. These are the thinkers. Okay, these are their ideas. Okay, the idea of being rational, empiricism, the scientific method. These are all things people like Francis Bacon, Voltaire, Montesquieu, even Isaac Newton, they challenged the traditional way of thinking. And this is why this period was called the Enlightenment. So you had Diderot. It looks like Diderot, but it's Diderot. He's responsible for the encyclopedia. The philosophes, or a group of people that had all these different philosophies. Laissez-faire became an idea that said the government shouldn't be so involved, hands off. The Magna Carta was a document that influenced the current United States Constitution. The feudal system. The feudal system is slavery. It is the exact same thing, but it's white people enslaving other white people in a process that they called serfdom. It's very medieval, but definitely something that was happening, and it was all over, all over. Mary Wollstonecraft was an early speaker for women's rights. The Declaration of Rights and Grievances was a document very similar to our Declaration of Independence, similar to our Constitution, basically wanted to outline things that we feel that people felt like they had rights, they should have certain rights, and things that they should be able to submit a grievance about. And a grievance is just something I have a problem with. If you in the current workforce, if you don't like something that's happening, you file a grievance to say I'm upset about the way this happened. Jean-Jacques Rousseau. Okay, so those are your thinkers to the Enlightenment chapter. Oh, then there's Mozart, women's rights, arbitrary, legitimate, and John Wesley. John Wesley is associated with the Methodist Church. Chapter 3, this is all about the French Revolution. Now, in chapter 2, you go through your notes. There's more information about the American Revolution. If you're going to write an essay and choose the topic of the American Revolution, go back to chapter 2. Chapter 3 is where you would find the information about the French Revolution. So you can go there and find what you need to know about the parties involved. But starting at the top, the Bastille, big prison, big symbol of oppression. Women started a riot in the grocery store because the price of bread rose significantly overnight. And they stormed the Bastille, pitchforks, flames, fire. I mean, yeah. The estates were the classes. Okay, the first, second, and third. The first estate was the church. The second estate was the nobility. The third estate was the bourgeoisie. First estate did not have to pay taxes. The second estate kept getting out of paying taxes. But the answer to that question is who did not have to pay taxes? The first estate did not have to pay taxes. And the third estate was very upset about it, and that's how come they were so angry, because why do we have to pay all the taxes? And so blah, 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 blah. They're the ones that started the French Revolution for the most part. And I feel rightly so. I mean, that's a legitimate question, but the French Revolution took a lot of crazy turns, and that's what any revolution can do sometimes. It can, what you call it, morph. That's the word. It can morph into something else. Okay? Dwarf would be kind of decline, but morph would mean kind of transform into something else. So no, it didn't really die down. It kind of just morphed into several different things. The National Assembly got started because after the French Revolution began, there was this whole concept of who's going to be the government now, because they literally, were like, they killed the king. They eventually killed the king. And Louis XVI is the king at the time with his wife Marie Antoinette that said, let them all eat cake. And, poor people wanting to know what are we going to do about normalcy, and she just said food, just let them eat cake. And they didn't like that. Of course, that's like shade, because you have cake. Okay, so the tennis court oath, they didn't have a building to meet in, so they went on a tennis court and they said, here's what we're going to do. The church got land taken away. The church got some power taken away. The church didn't like the reforms. And then Napoleon is born in Corsica, and then he comes to power as a military person. He rises to power because he's in the military doing some good things, as in he's getting some territory for France and defeating some of France's enemies. And says, how did he and why did he? Well, people were looking for some stability. So, and then the wars he fought, again, all helped him rise to power. Josephine was Napoleon's wife, and in Egypt he lost and left, and it was really bad. A plebiscite was sort of like a democratic forum, which was good. We're leaning into the concept of democracy and away from monarchy and absolutism. So the idea of a plebiscite sounded like Napoleon was onto something, and it gave him more popularity. Meritocracy, he would give awards for people who did great things by merit. He'd get this award or this recognition to say, you did some good things, you did some great things. And he was exiled. He ends up in Waterloo, but he's exiled to a different place first. But this is all in chapter 3. He dies in Waterloo, where he's finally exiled. Then other European nations built multiple coalitions against him because he was becoming too powerful. He was a predecessor of Adolf Hitler. He did a lot of things in terms of conquering, and people didn't know where he was going with that. So chapter 4 started us talking about the Industrial Revolution, and so we got Josiah Wedgwood, which is made advancements in the pottery industry, the spinning jenny, James Watt, Thomas Newcomb, Richard Trevithick. Trevithick is associated with the railroad industry, George Stephenson. Chapter 5 is a continuation of the Industrial Revolution. Cubism is an art form. Impressionism is an art form. 80% of the European population were commoners, okay, or the lower classes. The new elite were 5% of the population, and they owned almost 80% of the wealth. The inventions that come along as a result of electricity, we have the light bulb, we have a couple of different things that are mentioned in chapter 5, so go back to those notes and look at that. The Bessemer process was an easier way to make steel. Henry Bessemer is the name associated with that. The Mines Act of 1842 forbid women and children to work underground. Communism is a political ideology that pretty much collectivizes and everything belongs to the state. Fascism does that too, and it says that the state is more important than even the people. So yeah, so communism and fascism have some similar attributes, but they are political ideologies, and an ideology is just a way of thinking about something. The Factory Act forbid people 6 years old. You couldn't hire children anymore with the Factory Act of 1819, because people from 5 to 6 and 7 and on up were working in factories in dangerous conditions. Samuel Slater, a stock is a portion of a corporation. A corporation is just a business. Adam Smith, the British are in Belgium, extending their territory and their influence. You've got names like David Ricardo, Thomas Malthus, Karl Marx. Karl Marx and Frederick Engels are responsible for the Communist Manifesto, an important document that you have probably a piece of it in your final exam. You want to make sure you can recognize it and the authors. We talked about communism. Socialism is another ism that believes that the state should kind of take care of everybody. There should be no social classes, and that the state ought to be in charge of the majority of the major functions. Unions are organizations that help workers bargain for better working conditions. Strikes are demonstrations where unions would have the people who are fighting for better working conditions, they would demonstrate, they would strike, they would walk out so that they can get their demands met. Let's see. All right, chapter 6 goes into, there's a video that you might want to check out in chapter 6. The British get control of India. Mahatma Gandhi begins to be a major voice in the independence of India, and he uses a nonviolent approach, what he called civil disobedience. Imperialism is the word that we're moving into with chapter 6. So we start with the Industrial Revolution with chapter 4 and 5, and then we look at how industrialization moves the whole world into a phase of imperialism, where people are trying to go out into other countries and kind of grab for resources. Either they're trying to get resources or they're trying to sell their products in those countries. So there's a huge packet of notes about the Ottoman Empire. Make sure you read all those notes and answer those questions about the ethnic groups. 75 ethnic groups made up the Ottoman Empire. There was a period called the Crusades, where the Europeans had military campaigns against the Ottomans. There was Suleiman, that was the leader that died, and the Ottoman Empire began to decline. The Ottomans would take Christians and hold them hostage. European writers and intellectuals depicted the Ottomans as warlike and savage. Jihad is a very important name here. This means holy war. And chapter 7 is all about, so yeah, chapter 6 is all about the Ottoman Empire and the decline of it. It was one of the biggest empires in the Middle East. Chapter 7 dealt with the Opium Wars. Very, very important. And the principles of Sun Yat-sen, the Boxer Rebellion. So Asia was not feeling the West during the time of chapter 7. They were not happy with anything that the West was promoting, doing. Very bad times. Chapter 8 is all about World War I. Okay, the causes and effect in the Treaty of Versailles, and Germany's responsible. Serbia shot first. Austria declares war first. Russia is helping Serbia. Germany is helping Austria. Germany gets blamed a whole lot. The Central Powers are the bad guys in World War I. The Allies are the good guys. In World War II, which doesn't come to chapter 11, the Axis powers are the bad guys, and the Allies are the good guys. And a couple of countries switch sides between World War I and World War II. So we'll stop right there. There's also the Russian Revolution in chapter 8. So, and make sure you go through all that. Make sure you go through all that. So that's a lot, but thank you for listening. Write 5 facts. Make sure you review. Go through all your notes. Make sure you have everything. If there's anything you don't have, let me know in the comment section or the chat box or in an email. Thank you.